Trend Synth, where AI meets insight.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into the International Monetary Fund's latest take on the global economy, and more importantly, what they see as the biggest challenges just over the horizon. So this is how the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, puts it. The world economy has shown this surprising resilience, right? We dodged a much-feared global recession. But it's still not delivering the kind of strong, stable growth we need for real long-term prosperity. It perfectly captures that feeling of relief mixed with this deep sense of unease. Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to frame this whole explainer around what's really bugging the world's top financial watchdog. We'll explore the major forces that are reshaping our world and, maybe more importantly, uncover some of the hidden risks that could trip us all up. First up, let's just set the scene here. The world is in a state of pretty high uncertainty. And look, we're not just talking about the usual geopolitical tensions. We are seeing major policy shifts in trade, in technology, and in national security that are fundamentally rewiring global markets. It is a profound transformation, and yeah, new strains are definitely starting to show. So while the global economy has managed to stay afloat, this chart kind of tells the real story. The momentum for this year and next year is, well, it's underwhelming. Global growth is actually projected to slow down, and it's being held back by things like lagging productivity and public debt that is near record highs. This kind of sluggish pace just makes the whole system that much more vulnerable to shocks. Now, what's really fascinating here is how all these risks are tangled together. Think about it. Rising protectionism can slow down growth, which then puts a ton of pressure on financial markets. Meanwhile, everyone's hoping AI will create this massive productivity boom, but what if it doesn't deliver fast enough? See, these aren't separate issues. They actually feed off each other, creating a world that's just way less predictable. All right, this brings us to the first huge issue that has top economists on high alert. It's a risk that's been growing quietly, kind of away from the spotlight of traditional banking, but it's now just become way too big to ignore. That was the IMF chief's incredibly candid response when a reporter asked her about the risks lurking in something called the private credit market. When the head of the IMF says something keeps her up at night, that's a pretty clear signal that maybe we should all be paying attention. So what exactly is this market? Well, think of it like a parallel financial universe. These non-bank financial institutions, or NBFIs, now provide more than half of all financing. But here's the catch. They don't operate with the same level of regulatory oversight as regular banks. This whole sector just exploded after the 2008 financial crisis because stricter rules were put on banks, which naturally pushed more and more lending into these less regulated spaces. And now, that rapid, less transparent growth is a major source of concern. The big worry here, as JP Morgan's CEO, Jamie Dimon, bluntly puts it, is contagion. After a couple of recent failures of companies funded by this kind of private credit, the fear is that these might not be one-off incidents. They could be the first signs of wider, hidden problems just festering in the system. Now, the IMF isn't sounding the full-blown alarm just yet. They don't see a systemic crisis on the immediate horizon, but their language is really cautious. They're basically saying, hey, we are watching this very, very carefully. They're pushing policymakers to get a much better handle on what's happening in this space before a small problem becomes a really big one. Okay, let's shift gears now to another massive force of transformation, artificial intelligence. The IMF sees AI as a total double-edged sword. On one side, it presents this huge opportunity to kickstart our sluggish economies. But on the other, it's a significant threat to social cohesion. I mean, just look at that number. The sheer scale of AI's potential impact is just staggering. The IMF is projecting it will impact or even disrupt almost 40% of all jobs around the globe. We really are on the brink of a technological revolution that could profoundly change the way we all work. And this really illustrates a key problem. This disruption is not going to be felt equally, not even close. In advanced economies like the US and the UK, a whopping 60% of jobs are exposed to AI. But in low-income countries, that number drops to 26%. This creates a massive risk of divergence, where some nations could leap ahead while others fall even farther behind. So for that 60% of jobs in advanced economies that are exposed, the outcome is basically a coin toss. For about half of them, AI will likely complement their work and boost their productivity. Great. But for the other half, AI could start performing key tasks they used to do. That could lead to lower demand, lower wages, and in some cases, those jobs might just disappear entirely. So here's the crucial takeaway. The IMF's analysis is pretty stark. They're saying that without proactive policies to manage this huge shift, I'm talking stronger social safety nets, retraining programs, that kind of thing, AI is on a path to make the gap between the rich and the poor even wider. And this is the fundamental trade-off, right? On the one hand, AI could provide a desperately needed shot in the arm for a sluggish global economy, potentially adding almost a full percentage point to global growth. But on the other hand, it risks becoming this powerful engine of inequality, leaving millions and millions of people behind. So, given these massive challenges, from hidden financial risks to the disruptive force of AI, what's the game plan? What's the IMF actually telling policymakers to do to navigate this turbulent world? At the national level, the IMF has laid out a pretty clear four-part plan. And really, it's all about one thing: building resilience. Get your public finances in order, keep a lid on inflation, strengthen financial oversight, especially for those NBFIs we talked about, and create a better environment for private businesses to innovate and grow. But, and this is a huge but, the IMF is basically shouting from the rooftops that domestic policies alone are not going to cut it. A lot of today's biggest problems, from trade tensions and climate change to managing the rise of AI, are global problems. They just cannot be solved by any one country acting alone. So, what does this shared responsibility actually look like? Well, to reduce the big global imbalances that create instability, countries with huge trade surpluses like China are being urged to boost spending at home. That would increase their imports and help balance out global trade. At the same time, countries with large deficits like the US need to rein in their own spending and save more to cool down their economies and reduce their reliance on foreign money. And that really is the final crucial question that hangs over all of this. The playbook is there. We know what it takes to build a more stable and prosperous global economy. But in an era of rising geopolitical friction and intense domestic polarization, is the will to actually cooperate still there? That is the challenge that is going to define our future.